what I will often run into is people who think they need mastering. I then have to explain to them the difference, and then I have to explain to them that where their mix is, mastering is not going to save it. And if you don't believe me, just use Lander or something, one of these AI things, and see what happens. And just picture a little better than that with a human mastering company. Anybody who masters, it's going to be a little bit better than that. But I wouldn't say it's going to be a ton better night and day. If it sounds awful, it's not going to get great. Every mastering engineer out there, don't cringe yet. Trust me. Stick with this. As soon as this understanding happens where they realize that mixing is the thing that is going to make the most difference and is the thing that takes all day, whereas mastering doesn't. Mastering was created as a way to transfer. It was a medium transfer tool. In other words, you'd have your music on tape, and then you would have to transfer it to vinyl. And the way that gets done was done by a mastering engineer. That's what is the purpose and the creation. That's why it was created to start with. So once you understand that, what you'll understand is that mastering starts at the level where the song is complete and it's one stereo file. All right. Granted, back then when this was happening, it was typically mono, but that's not the point. Let's say it's one stereo file, right? That's what a mastering engineer deals with, which means when they bring up the top end, they're bringing up the top end on everything in your mix. Whereas, let's say your vocals are dark, but everything else is super bright. Well, if I bring up the top end to make your vocals more bright, now everything else in your mix is also more bright. Not good. So, like, the way to get around this, like, that's the real point of this video, is I have a way that I deal with stuff like that when I can't get multi-track stems, when I can't get the ability to mix the song for these people, because they may not have the money. There's so many reasons, right? But I'm somebody who likes to say yes. I've started saying no much more because you have to when you have less time. But especially when I started, I always wanted to help people figure out ways to make what they got work, make it happen. If they don't have the money to do a mix, which is going to cost like 3 to 4 to 5, could be any amount more than mastering, but it's many times more cost wise to mix than it is to master. And this is true all levels up. There's like a consistent ratio where it keeps going up in price. Serban, used to charge 10 grand a mix. He may charge more now, 15. I don't know what he's charging, but the point is he's charging that, and then the best mastering engineer is charging 1 grand a track, 2 grand a track. Like, there, you see the multiple of difference there is. That's because of the time involved. It's nowhere near the same amount of time. And again, if you're a mastering engineer and you charge 5 grand, well, I'm not talking about you, but either way, you still don't charge as much as the guy who's mixing. That's the bottom line. So that's the big overall point. The guy who's mixing is spending all day putting every piece of that track together, every single piece. Whether you have a beat track, there could be 20 instruments in the beat track, or each of those pieces separately gets put together with the vocals, which are separate, and then you get a mix. So no matter what genre you're working in, because when it's a band and an orchestra, and like picture anything, Metallica with the symphony, and there could be 35 freaking violins plus a band. It could be like, there's no way to not understand the concept that when you have to put every single track together, every single multi-track, that's not going to take more time. So let's just move off that for a second. Some people don't have the money to pay for a mix. Some people lost their computer files. Some people have situations where, for whatever reason, they got something from a studio that's halfway decent, but they want to improve it. There's a number of reasons that they won't be able to give you the ability to mix their song. There's a number of times, like I've run into this a lot, and I'm someone who still wants to help. And in that case, this is what I do. And this is not a sponsored video. I'm not being paid by any of these companies. I just want to show you what I do. That's the point. So if I'm getting a track from somebody that's close to being fixed, I will pop open something like Lalai. Now, this is something I discovered a while back, but it's so helpful, okay? The first few songs are free also, and when you're doing this kind of thing, because they give you a certain amount of minutes free, and then it's $40 for 650 minutes, which is tons and tons and tons of songs you'll be able to do for that. So it's not like a hugely expensive thing, but what it does is huge. Because let me explain how I'll work. This allows you to break stems out of a file that's all put together. Now, let me just start by saying this is in no way better than having all the multi-tracks separate. It's not even close to going to be the same, but it will be way better than working from a stereo mix that isn't close to being good. It's way better than that. So the reason being is because I can rebalance what they did that may have been awful in terms of their balance by using something like this. So I've just started to incorporate this into my mastering. When people need songs mastered, I will sometimes work from the 2-track, the stereo track, if what they send me is good enough. But in other words, if it's a mix that's there, then yeah, I'm going to go old school style, which is the way I always used to work. I used to send my finished mix into a mastering engineer, and he just got one stereo file. He would run it through his gear, do his magic, send it back to me, and then boom, I'm a little happier. Okay, now that's generally what mastering is. But we can't look generally in the world of now and the future and what is happening with people making music on their laptops. And it comes free with the computer. I mean, it's just everybody's doing it. So because of that, we got to move with the times. The times now are sometimes people don't realize that they need all the stems. They may have deleted everything, but they have these songs they need done. There could be 100 reasons I could come up with why they would just have a mix and not the rest. So once you realize that that's all they got, you come over here, you drop it in, and you separate vocals from the instrumental. You then separate, this is my method, okay? You separate one, so now you've got one vocal track all by itself, and you got, well, it's not one, it's actually all the vocals, all by itself. Then you got the drums, the instruments, the bass, all on another track, so that's the instrumental. What I'll do is then separate out the drums from just the instrumental. So in other words, I dump the instrumental in after I got the vocals out of the way, and then I just pull drums off it. Now I've literally got the drums separate from the bass and all the other instruments in the song. Then I separate the bass out. So at the end of this, what I have is vocals on one stereo track. I've got drums on one stereo track. I've got bass on one stereo track, and I've got everything else, which is mid-range and up, on one stereo track. Using that, I can rebalance the entire song in a way that, in my opinion, sounds way better. It sounds way better, because if somebody's mix is all out of whack and they're coming to you thinking that you're going to save it in mastering, you got to explain to them, like, look, using the tools of today, I can do way better than anybody using AI and using any sort of thing where they're just going to mess with the 2-track. I will really improve it, and then they'll work with you. So I'm really giving you the tip on how to be top level here, because you're using techniques that other people may not be using. Some people may, and I'm not talking about you if you are. So, maybe you are, that's great. But this is something I came up with a long time ago to be Superman. I had to figure out a way to make these people happy who that's all they got. And this is what I did. But let me also give you some caveats, all right? Caveat all day. Number one, if they give you a mix where you got multiple vocals on top of each other, I would abandon ship and don't do it. Tell them, can't work on this, sorry. And I'll tell you why. Because all the vocals on top of each other means no matter what I do, I can't deal with that mess, because the vocals can't be split up in terms of lead, background, ad-libs, or harmony 1, 2, 3. You won't have all that. You just have one glob of vocals stacked on top of each other, and if the vocals don't sound in tune, in pitch, if it sounds like crazy, you're never going to be able to help it, because odds are one is doing one thing out of pitch and the other one's in another out of pitch note, and you won't be able to tune them because they're going to be fighting each other. The tuner won't know how to react. So that's I can't tune vocals when there's just a glob of vocals. So I abandon on that and can't work on this, sorry, because I'll never be able to make it the way you want, because I know what they want. They want it to sound great, which I could do if I had the multi-tracks, but I can't do if I have this. So next option that I'll abandon ship on when I get it is if anything's clipping. In other words, the most common problem you'll run into is too much low end on the mix. They're doing way too much low end, and that's why it fails the car test like crazy. But beyond that, if it's really ducking whatever processing they have on their mix bus, if it's ducking it like crazy because the low end's so out of control, then your whole mix is going to be like doing this thing where it's loud, it's quiet, it's loud, it's quiet. And then there's no way to naturally just solve that in mastering. Like, no shot you're going to be able to fix that. So Like, so I look at it like, okay, I can't do nothing, and especially if it's so loud it's clipping, which will happen too. You'll get a mix where you'll be like, this is so obviously distorting, and the limiter must be like, bugging out, because listen to what's happening. Like, I hear so much distortion. You'll never be able to remove that distortion from their stems. Like, even with the stems, you can't, there's not a stem for remove distortion. So trust me when I tell you, that is something to get out of on. If you hear a ton of compression doing it, it's the same thing. You want to get out of there. Don't work on that, because you won't be able to make it great. If they get close enough where these things aren't happening and there's one lone vocal by itself that just needs tuning or whatever, you can absolutely work in this way and really be the person that takes what they gave you to the next level. Because all that matters to them is what comes out of the speakers. The people who are just starting out didn't have the benefit you and I had. If we grew up in the era where to be a musician, you had to be in a studio working with people who obviously knew something because they're running a studio. So they know things, and you're forced just by being around it. It's like you get the knowledge that they have because they're talking to you. So they'll just be like, so who do you have mastering this? And you'll be like, what? What's that? Well, it's the step after mixing. You need mastering. It's like, oh, I didn't know that. So you're just forced to learn when you came up that way. But when everybody thinks they're a mixer, a producer, an engineer, they don't learn nothing unless they go out of their way to learn. So these people coming to you don't know enough to know what they need. So because of that, you have to literally go through the motions of explaining what they need, just like they would have gotten if they were in your studio. There's really no way around that. Or you could just say, forget about it, but then you're discounting the majority of the work and the population that you could get, which will also help you learn the more you deal with stuff that's totally crazy. Like, I mean, honestly, I learned a lot from working with stuff that was so nuts, because you learn what can't be fixed, what can be fixed, what's possible, what's not possible. You just learn all this. So I have conversations with everybody I work with. I don't just take the work and do it and send it back. I have to talk to them so that I can really give them something that they could take with them forever. Like knowledge, like if you just give me the stems and all your multi-tracks, stems, if you give me the pieces, however you need to give them to me. Some people are very particular about their vocal effects and this and that. So let them put those on and then give you a vocal stem. That's why I say stems kind of interchangeably with multi-tracks, even though I completely obviously understand the terms are different. There's no right or wrong way to teach somebody how to do what they need to do to make themselves happy. So I always explain, you need the pieces, man. You need all the pieces. I don't care if you're, whatever it is, if you're concerned about something, then print that stuff, send that to me with the effects. But if you don't know what you're doing, I can't hit an undo button for what you add. And you'll be surprised how many people don't know this. So many people think that just by sending you a mix, you can then make it great, even if the mix isn't great. And the number grows all the time because everybody's a musician now. Everybody who has an idea for a melody and a beat is a musician. And this isn't a bad thing, because now all of a sudden everybody has access to the stuff. But it is a bad thing in the sense that now we have to teach more. No matter what, you have to become a teacher, because everybody coming to you doesn't know. Whereas back in the day, they would just come to you and then they'd know because they were with you. Now they do it on their own. They don't know, and they still want the help. So I'm just letting you know how it's working, how it goes. And when you use something like this, you could really take what they're doing to the next level. When you start doing stuff like this, you are sort of bridging the gap between traditional mastering and what mixing is. And that's when I say I don't care about the terms. Like, the concepts are what's important. The concepts. So once they understand that with the pieces we can do great work, then if they could afford to give you the pieces and have you mix it, they will. But like, don't get hung up on the term stems and explaining to them what that is compared to multi-tracks. Don't get hung up on that. Just get what you need. That's why, like, I've often said, like, terms used to mean this and now mean this. They meant, when everybody knows what a term means, then that's what that term means. But the way the world works is, as soon as nobody knows what you're talking about but you, the one guy who knows it, then guess what? That term doesn't mean that anymore, because you're the only guy who knows what it means. And it could be a bunch of us, but the point is, It's not important to me to explain to them what the terms mean so much. I may tell them once, but if they don't get it, I'm just getting what I need from them. I'm telling them what they need to know to move forward. In other words, they need the pieces that they have on their computer, one track at a time. They need the pieces. Send me the pieces, and I'll put it together in a way that you will like it. Because when you put the pieces together, I don't have a way to separate all the pieces. So it's just like you figure out a way to say it where they understand it. That's all. And in this case, you know, mastering, I think, is always going to be a part of this business that cannot be removed. There's always going to be a job for a mastering engineer because it's like the second look. People who are mastering, they should really, you almost have to have an even more open mind as a mastering engineer, because in today's world, like when I'm doing this, I'm never trying to rebalance what they're doing. If it feels great, if there's a vibe, if it's awesome, because I don't really care how great it sounds technically. I just care if what they're giving me elicits an emotion or like of something that's great. And if it doesn't, is it because that it's just the balance of everything is so out of whack that I can't hear what I want to hear, like anything? If it's a muddy mess, like in other words, I'm really just trying to decipher if what they gave me is great before I even do this. Like that's the critical part. This is like with great power, great responsibility type stuff. You can't just separate everything you get and then rebalance it if it was a vibe to start with. You have to kind of really gauge what you need to do. And this is why I say the traditional way to master with just a stereo file is usually the better way to go. That's usually the better way to go that I would prefer to do, and that I think most mastering engineers would prefer to do. But if we got no choice because what you're giving us ain't there and we still want to help you, then what are we going to do? In my opinion, this is what we do. We got no choice because we can do this now, so why not do it? In other words, you couldn't do this years back. If I were to say, like, is this a good idea or bad idea? It's case by case. When you do this, keep things in mind. Don't redo a bunch of mix bus processing. If they mix bus processed it all to hell when they gave it to you, don't like add it. I'm not always adding compression and stuff. I'm usually just rebalancing what they give me and maybe something in parallel so that I can blend it in if I need. But like, that's all I'm doing. Maybe a little EQ here and there. Like, I'm not doing much because just getting the balance right in a case like this is going to be huge. And it's something that a lot of these, computer programs are not doing. So let's leave you with that. Do me a favor. If you dug the video, slap some stems with rebalance on them, down in the comments section. I appreciate that if you could. Also hit the like button if you dug it. Subscribe if you haven't already. My name's Evan Jaffe. This is Custom Cut Studios. You guys seriously got this. Take it easy.